we had to build a really good platform that was extremely stable, that had immense developer love, and I think that was always our core goal and our core focus, whether it was internally within the team or externally within the community or even within our investors. Our core focus has always been like create something that developers out there will really love, and until we were absolutely confident that we had something like that, we didn't even want to think about monetization. So I think a lot of it comes down to propagating that belief in what you're building and just having that alignment with everyone that we are going to continue to kind of build it this way.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Matt Yonkovit, joined once again by co-host Avi Press. And today we are joined by Nikhil Nandagopal from Appsmith. Nikhil, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on the show, Matt and Avi. It's really nice to be here and to chat with you about open source and Appsmith.
Okay. Now, Nikhil, I promised that I'd be nice, but what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite of what we normally do, which is we're going to start with a whole bunch of rapid fire questions. And I have a list of 100 questions that I'm going to ask you in the next 10 minutes. Are you ready? What? No, Avi, you can't tell him I'm kidding. No, this is true.
He looked very scared.
No, he was not scared. You weren't scared, Nikhil, were you?
No. Bring him on.
Okay, fair enough. So maybe just tell the listeners where you're from. See, that's pretty easy.
Hey, so I'm from Bangalore, India. I was born and raised here. I pretty much grew up over here, did all my education right here in India.
Well, so it's late for you, very late. So we appreciate you coming on. We do appreciate that. But how's the weather at this time?
It's actually pretty good. It's really cool. I think it's about 23 degrees Celsius out there. And it's really lovely weather.
Lovely. It's always nice when you can have a nice, cool evening. Sometimes it just gets unbearably hot some places in the evening, and it's hard to sleep, hard to get any sort of work done. But switching tactics a little bit, you're currently the CTO, is that correct, and founder, or are you just the founder at Appsmith?
Yeah, I'm the founder and chief product officer here.
Chief product officer, okay. And so that was not your first job, though. So where does a chief product officer and founder start? What was your first job?
Oh, okay. So my first job was as an engineer, actually. So I started my career as a mobile developer. I built Android applications.
Oh, so does that mean your preference is for Android over Apple?
That's a hotly debated topic at Appsmith, and I think because I have been an Android developer for the majority of my career, I do prefer Android.
Okay, fair enough. So going back to those first, what is your first Linux distribution?
The first, that's really hard. I think it was SUSE. I think it was OpenSUSE, yeah.
Oh, OpenSUSE. Okay, yeah.
Nice.
Mine was Slackware. I've said that before on this show. Like most people are like, Slack what? Or if they do know Slackware, they're like, oh my God, we're so sorry. It's so hard, right? So it's definitely one of those things. Avi, you were gonna say you were gonna make fun of me, weren't you? Avi,
I was going to say, wow, like you made it past the installation. That's very admirable.
Yeah, it was on floppy disk too, if that helps. But I date myself. I'm very old that way. So, Nikhil, what sort of like movies do you watch? Do you have a favorite movie that you'd like to share with all of us?
Oh, a favorite movie? I don't know. Actually, I don't really watch too many movies, to be honest. If I had to like pick a favorite,
or you could go books. If there's a favorite book that you have, something that you've read recently, that might be good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorites is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I think that's just a super go-to book for me. I'm still like trying to think of a movie because I think I should have one.
It's okay. It's okay. Maybe as we go, a movie will pop into your head, and during another, when we're talking, you'll just be like, "Yes, it's fill in the blank." Which would be great. It always makes for great, entertaining conversations. Yes. And so because Appsmith is open source, you must have a favorite open source tool that you could not live without. So if you had to pick one of the open source tools you use on a regular basis outside of your own that you've built, like what would you say is your favorite tool or the most used tool that you have?
It would probably be Sentry. I think it's the bread and butter of the engineering team. Just incredible platform. To make sure that you're able to catch every single bug and make sure that the product is like bug free. I'd say I just really love Sentry.
Oh,
Nice.
oh, awesome. Very nice. And so if you were going to, you started Appsmith, you were part of this founding team. Was there a company that you admired or that you looked at as an example of we want to be that company in the future or be like that company?
Oh, for sure. I think GitLab comes to mind.
Okay.
We modeled a lot of our core principles and beliefs around GitLab, everything from like our pricing model, which is open core, to how we thought about how what features should be paid versus what should not. So how we thought about just how do we set the the culture of the company and what we believe in, how do we operate as a remote team, or remote first team, and all of that. I think GitLab is definitely a company we really look up to.
Yeah, they've got that great handbook that they published where
Yeah.
it's like all of their company processes are just public. I know so many people who use that. Yeah, very influential.
Absolutely. It's super helpful for other budding startups that are just trying to understand how the world of open source works and how do you run a company that's literally building in public and trying to get it right. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. So, completely random question because the random generator popped this up. You're at a conference, and I know that you speak at conferences, right? You've spoken at conferences. So if they are going to have you walk up on the stage and they say, what music do you want to walk up to? What song do you pick?
Okay.
This one always throws people for a loop.
Yeah,
It
it really
does.
does.
And it's great because we get so many interesting answers. So,
I don't know. Maybe I just want to rock on to my own music. So maybe it would be something like AC/DC, probably.
Okay. I am an AC/DC fan.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yes,
So,
I've actually seen them live like 7 times. So
Whoa.
I think
that was
I
before.
probably-
Yeah.
I think I'll probably come on stage to rock or bust because it's either going to be rock or bust if I'm at a conference.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. And we'll close out the rapid fire questions with the most controversial of all, which is what text editor or editor are you using for code nowadays?
Honestly, so I've moved to product a lot, and funnily enough, I think it's still VS Code at times, but I'm trying to use a lot of online IDs. So I've actually been using Core Sandbox a lot because I just like to avoid the whole setup, the whole setup process today. So when I just want to make like quick edits, I just use Core Sandbox mostly.
Ah, awesome. See, look, Nikhil, you survived.
You did
You
it.
survived rapid fire mode.
Yep.
Yeah,
that bad?
I think you definitely took it easy on me.
Oh,
That's true. That's
wait a
true.
minute. Now I gotta. Oh, that's like throwing down the gauntlet. That means I'm challenged for the
Well,
next
we're gonna
time.
ask harder questions throughout the rest of the
Oh,
No, I mean,
If
except
anyone
for except for the movie one, I think I was just thrown with that. I think.
Oh, okay. Well. So everybody in the future who gets those rapid questions when they become harder, you know who to blame now.
Yes.
I'm just gonna say. So, it's great for you to join, and thanks for kind of going through that rapid fire. It's a good way to just get to know someone before we talk a little bit about what they're doing and what's going on in the space. And I know that you are here to talk a little bit about Appsmith, which is open source. We are the Hacking Open Source Business podcast, so we love to talk about open source and business, the business of open source. And so maybe just tell those listeners who might not be familiar with Appsmith or maybe ancillary familiar with Appsmith about Appsmith.
Yeah, so Appsmith is an open source platform for developers to just build all of their internal tools. I myself have been a developer that had to build internal tools, and I never really liked doing it because internal tools always got the least bandwidth, the least engineering bandwidth, least product bandwidth, pretty much zero design bandwidth, right? And because of that, internal tooling is in a really poor state. Most internal tools look really terrible. They're just not reliable. They're underperformant, slow and janky. And that kind of set us down on this path that, why can't we make internal tools as good as like the best SaaS software out there? I mean, sure, they're custom, but a lot of their code building blocks are the same. So what if we could just, create a platform for, engineering teams to actually reuse a lot of the core building blocks, and be able to configure them and put them together in a way that makes sense for their business. And that's kind of how Appsmith was born. And also kind of why it's open source, because it's super engineering focused. It's for developers to just kind of be able to get their internal tooling needs out the door much quicker.
I'd love to dig into this exact point that this is kind of, it's for developers, and therefore it being open source is a reasonable strategy. Since you're trying to almost de-emphasize the code, like, we're trying to, you're trying to make building internal tools easier, focus on code less, and just, build the tools. Given that you're trying to de-emphasize code, why does it being open source matter?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of things here. I think, we're not really trying to de-emphasize code too much when you think about it. Today, we're all used to reusing, different libraries and building blocks. It's not a new concept. Today, you actually use a lot of NPM packages or Java libraries. And that's pretty common. And what Appsmith is really doing is just allowing you to use all of those different building blocks inside a platform that kind of gives you a very simple interface to actually interact with these different building blocks. Now, why it's important for it to be open source for developers is one, developers, unfortunately, in most organizations don't have a lot of purchasing power. And because of that, they can't make a lot of software buying decisions, right? But what they do have a lot of control over is the type of open source packages and libraries that they can actually incorporate into their tech stack, right? And because of that, it was really important for us to create a way for developers to get their hands on a platform that they could actually use for building all of their all internal tooling needs without having to go through the entire buying process that can be quite tricky, especially in large organizations. In a lot of organizations, it's also really important to go through security audits and other complex processes. Whereas by virtue of it being open source, it's just really easy to audit the software. You can skip the entire vendor procurement loop, and you can get in the hands of developers as quickly as possible. And also because Appsmith is touching your core internal data, it actually works on top of your production database and your core production APIs. It's really important for it to be secure. And you probably wouldn't trust a cloud provider, with that core critical information. You'd want to self-host this kind of software behind your own firewalls to ensure that you have the best security. And just by being open source, it makes it a lot easier to self-host, this entire platform. Makes it a lot easier to ensure that it is super secure behind your own firewalls, and you can just bypass those security audits and things like that. So that's kind of why open source.
So, question on that open source side. At some point, you were part of a discussion on founding Appsmith or creating Appsmith at the beginning. Okay. And maybe you were at a cafe, maybe you were sitting around, drinking coffee or tea with someone, and we have this idea. Was there any dissension at that point that this is going to be open source or not? Or was there any discussion, or was it just like you and everyone else involved in that discussion was like, it's open source, it's done?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it didn't start off as open source when we were thinking about it. We thought about, should it be open source? Should it be in a closed source? Should it be a self-hosted platform? Should it be a cloud-hosted platform? I think the discussion went, it began as, hey, let's try to build something that's going to be like really useful for developers. And the one thing that never changed through the journey was that it is going to be engineering focused. It is going to be for developers and engineering teams. And I think the open source angle and the self-hosted angle, all of that began to fall into place as we kind of discovered, our users a lot better. We began to understand their use cases. We began to understand the kind of data critical needs that they had. And I think those were kind of like some of the tipping points that eventually got us to think that, okay, we do kind of need it to be open source to actually get into the hands of developers. And the other thing that actually sparked us was that we realized that this was such a broad platform. Honestly, when we were planning to build it, we drastically underestimated the scope of what we were actually building. We thought we thought that hey, it's going to be a simple platform. It's going to have all these functionalities, but
we never
simple platform.
Never,
yeah.
we never overestimate, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that just kind of flip the switch in our head that this is not a platform that you can build alone. This is a platform that needs other developers out there helping you add more widgets, add more integrations, add more themes, be able to customize it, be able to give you great feedback on what is a great developer experience for a platform like this, because we were building the platform for the majority of developers out there. And all of those things eventually culminated into this decision that hey, open source is a no-brainer for this project.
So once you decide to go down that route, so you said that Appsmith has taken an open core approach to the business model around this. And I think what's interesting with that is that I think a lot of the other, not all, but a lot of open core businesses that we've talked to, a lot of those core features end up largely getting offered inside of, like the cloud service, the managed version, because then it's much easier to, federate access to it. If I'm understanding you correctly, with Appsmith, the managed version is sometimes a lot harder of a sell because it's got to talk to the prod database. And so it's much more amenable to being self-hosted. So how do you think about open core, federating access to certain kinds of custom features when the whole thing is being self-hosted?
Yeah. So a couple of things here. One is that inside our open core edition, one is we have to have like a really good separation of features and a good understanding of how are we actually planning to build this entire system, right? And that kind of that actually, I think GitLab gave us a really good mental model there, where we try to figure out what kind of features do developers really care about versus what kind of features do managers and CXOs really care about, right? And as we kind of went down that path, we realized that these features were largely non-overlapping. And in the cases where they were overlapping, we were able to kind of figure out a clear line or demarcation between them. And because of that, the way we built it is that there's this great core of features that actually allow you to build any kind of application you'd like. So if you're a developer, you have an application in your in mind, you'll really easily be able to build that app with Appsmith, get it to life very, very quickly, right? And on top of this entire core are these other tertiary features that kind of help organizations extract value from the core a lot better, right? And those features are things like having a lot more granular access control, so that you can safely share it with a really large organization base, depending on different access criteria, right? That's super complex and not really something a developer at this point in time needs to care about. Or things like having custom branding so that the applications look and feel exactly like what every other application in your org looks like, so that you don't have to explain to everyone that, oh, hey, we're using this platform and this internal tool is safe to use inside this really large organization, right? So as we kind of discovered that separation, right, we realized that it was very clear the type of features that our actual buyers, who are not our users are developers, and our buyers are typically managers and CXOs. We kind of figured out what features they would really need and would click for them, and we kind of built those as a layer around this open core. And we do actually have a managed hosting platform today, in fact, but we don't really charge for it because most users don't really care too much about the managed hosting bit of it. I mean, we will plan to charge for it in the future, but we haven't focused too much on it because we've just seen that managers and CXOs really typically care about the data security, so they are more than happy to actually self-host it. And what they really care about is not the fact that we are managing it and guaranteeing uptime. What they really care about are these additional features that help them unlock more and more value from the platform. They realize that, hey, it's really easy to build one app, two apps, but how do we get 30, 40, 50 apps out there, and how can we spread those applications really, really quickly inside our organization so that the org can move faster? And that's what the business edition actually allows you to unlock.
Got it.
Real quick. So when you're talking about those features that are part of the open core and making those decisions, you said that it's really driven based on what the users or the buyers could potentially want. How do you figure that out? Like, what have you found as an effective strategy to kind of suss out or pull the information out of the user base? Do you have you do regular questions with them, just conversations, or surveys, telemetry baked into the software? What sort of, things are helping drive those decisions on what should be in the open core and what shouldn't?
Yeah, I think one, it really begins with some kind of belief, right? Because if you're just kind of trying to measure things and test the waters, you'll typically end up with a lot of random data. Is my firm belief, and especially in the open source space, telemetry it's really hard to get. You only get a very small sliver of your actual user base sharing a lot of data with you, and of course that's why we have Scarf. So that's incredible, but. I think it really begins with some kind of hypothesis and belief. And, for us, this was the belief that, developers don't have a lot of purchasing power, managers do. And what we did was we actually began to work with a couple of early companies that, adopted us pretty early on. We got them onto our Slack channel. We worked very closely with them. And as we kind of, saw the platform improve, and we saw the adoption of the platform in these companies improve, we naturally saw them reaching out to us. Instead of us reaching out to them, they would begin reaching out to us, and they would say, hey, we'd like priority support for these type of things, or hey, we'd like a feature to kind of scale this inside the org where we need more tighter access controls and things like that. And the minute we knew that the conversation was coming from more of a manager or from someone slightly higher up, we knew that this is something that we could potentially, create real value from. But whenever we heard directly from developers that, this is impeding my app building experience, I'm just not able to build my first application, or it's slow, or, I really need this one particular feature to make my app look great, we typically knew that came from a place of creation and not really from adoption. And that was kind of what we used to separate these two.
Now, out of the curiosity, when you get those feature requests, was there any discussion about potentially, especially early on, before maybe you had a lot of funding, doing those as like paid for engineering? I know some companies do non-recurring engineering where it's like, oh, you want that feature, it's $500,000, right? And then, okay, then some company pays for it, or they quote unquote sponsor. Is that something that you've experimented with?
So I mean, we for sure heard it. I mean, a lot of customers actually pitched it to us, but it wasn't something we were very comfortable doing for a couple of reasons. First off, for a very long time, to be honest, we were only focused on our community edition, and we were very clear about that. In fact, I think we're just in the process of launching our business edition right now for the very first time, and because of that, we didn't want to begin, diverting our attention to the highest bidder, because that would have skewed the community interest, and it would have kind of, given people the idea that we just care about who was paying us the most to kind of solve their problems, right? Mm-hmm. It won't give us a holistic view of what engineers really want. So for a really long time, we actually just staved off any kind of enterprise feature request, and we said, hey, we're not going to be building that this year, it's going to take a while. In fact, only in our third year did we actually begin building it out, and now we're pretty much past our third year, and we're beginning to launch it. Okay. So that's sorry.
So this leads to an interesting question, and sorry to interrupt, but this is so you went for 3 years without a commercial offering. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So at what point, like, was there a goal that says, like, as soon as we have X number of users, as soon as we have something, then we're going to look at commercialization? Or was it, it's just time because we need to start like thinking revenue? Was it build to a certain level and then commercialize? Was that the thought?
Yeah, we didn't have a user metric or an adoption metric around commercialization. We instead had like a platform vision that the platform had to be in a state where we were happy with the pace at which we could actually expand it, because the problem is that if the platform doesn't have a very solid foundation, it can be really hard to begin to extend it in different ways. And we kind of knew that in the future we'd want more widgets, we'd want more integrations. We'd have to invest a lot more in custom JavaScript code and the coding experience. And we wanted all that to be really easy to kind of add and customize to the platform. So we wanted to get the platform to a level where we knew it would be very easy for us to make those changes, as well as to get to a level where we could see that a lot of users could actually extract value from it without too many hiccups in the way, because that was our core. We wanted to build a really stellar developer product that people would be very, very happy with, and only then actually begin thinking about monetization.
So when you were going out to raise the initial amount of money for Appsmith for this team, I guess, did you have any pushback from investors around kind of delaying the commercialization of it so far? Because Appsmith, it looks very mature in terms of all the things that it can do, and I think a lot of open source projects would love to have the luxury to take that amount of time and build that kind of adoption and community base to go do that. But I imagine not everyone is so lucky. So I'm curious, how did you sell that to investors?
So I think I think the trick is to not sell it and to not sell it. We want. I mean, this isn't. This is a path you tread, right? And you don't want to package it up and prettify it for somebody else to hop on your bandwagon, because it's going to be a really long path. It's going to be a difficult path, and instead. What we did is we actually looked for people who were really excited about this path, who really believed in this path with us, and who had a lot of great ideas, how to tread this path of open source really, really well. And because we just found the right people who were excited about working with us with this strategy and with this belief that this software should be open source, it was honestly very easy. So the conversations weren't really hey, we should do it because open source is great and it will help us in X, Y, Z. It was always hey, yeah, obviously open source is great, right? And these are all these amazing benefits. Let's talk about how you're going to really leverage it to unlock more power and get into the hands of more developers, and what would that look like? What would the product be like? So that's really how we thought about it. There's no point selling something like open source. You either believe in it and you're really excited about it, or you don't.
So I guess maybe to get a little bit more specific, I don't necessarily mean to open source it or to not open source it, but rather to be commercializing it with to kind of turn on some of those those enterprise features that you were talking about. And so I guess I'm curious, did you have opportunities to, for instance, sell something that you kind of turned down because you were continuing to focus on the community edition of it? And I'm curious, how I imagine this took a lot of sticking to your core beliefs and turning down opportunities to continue that focus. Were there any particular points where you had a really compelling opportunity that you turned down to continue the focus on the community edition?
I'd say there are probably a few where people have reached out and said hey, let's work together, let's try and build some of these core features out together, and we kind of had to take a strong stance and say no, we're not going to do that right now. It's going to be at least another year before we actually try to focus on this. I think it wasn't too difficult a conversation, to be honest, because we were always clear that we were building this platform for the long run, and in order to do that, we had to build a really good platform that was extremely stable, that had immense developer love, and I think that was always our core goal and our core focus, whether it was internally within the team or externally within the community, or even within our investors. Our core focus has always been create something that developers out there would really, really love, and until we were absolutely confident that we had something like that, we didn't even want to think about monetization. So I think a lot of it comes down to propagating that belief in what you're building, and just having that alignment with everyone that we are going to continue to kind of build it this way. And I think we've just been very transparent about that. And I think especially with the community, you'd be surprised, but I think the conversation with the community was a lot harder because there would be so many people who would ask for features like granular access control and audit logs and SSO and wonder why we're just not building it. And they consistently follow up every the 2 to 3 months and say like, when is this feature launching? And we'd have to be really transparent and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I understand you're a slightly larger organization and team, and you'd see a lot of value from this, but there are all these 20 other features that the large community is just really struggling with right now, and our priorities are there before we can get to this. And being really transparent about that was very, very important for us.
So your focus was really on getting the platform to a place where you felt that it was the good foundation to take you to a commercialization strategy, it sounds like. But
yeah, absolutely.
That didn't preclude you from growing the community. And so I'm curious, while you're going through this, a lot of companies measure their success on ARR, right? So how much ARR do we have? More ARR, more customers. Well, so when you don't have ARR to get or customers to get, what sort of metrics or things are you looking at growing in this phase before that commercialization? How are you measuring your broad appeal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the number one and the absolute number one thing that we live and die by inside Appsmith is our developer retention. That's pretty much the main thing that we really care about. And what this means is it's not about getting new developers. It's really just about making sure that every developer who checks out the product sticks around for the long run. And if they didn't, why did they stick around? What stopped them from actually using Appsmith? Because it's the kind of product that could pretty much help you in your everyday work. You could use it for a ton of things, whether it's your side hobby project or your actual work for internal tools, or even experimenting on something on a side business if you'd like. So we'd consistently keep asking that question, and we'd be obsessed with what is our developer retention, and how do we measure it, and how do we make sure that the developer retention gets better, and that would be our core metric internally.
So how do you measure that? Because obviously open source, you can download it, you can install it from source, you can get it from multiple places. So I know a lot of companies have this challenge of a million people went and got our software, who's actually using it. How did you go about solving that? Or how did you come up with metrics to kind of show where you were?
Yeah. So this is one of the cases where honestly, we don't believe that, being accurate is the right answer here.
Okay.
And we kind of assume that that what we do know is representative of the larger audience. So whatever data that we do get, we kind of ensure that, hey, that data is actually working for us. So if we have, let's say, 100 people in the community, and maybe only 5 or 10 decide to share data with us and say, this is what apps I'm building, and this I'm kind of sticking around. We kind of use that as a good proxy to understand how our engagement with these developers is working. But we also track things like the developers in our community. Do they consistently engage with us on Discord? So our most active Discord members, are they continuing to be active? Are they continuing to build? Do they keep asking more questions? Do they keep contributing? And kind of helping not only us, but also helping other new community members actually get onboarded with their applications. So that's one thing that we looked at. We looked at obviously product metrics of whether people were actually getting to their first successful application, and whether they were sticking around with building more applications, going forward. We looked at stuff like that. We looked at our engagement on our events, whether people were joining those events, whether they continue to engage with us on our community calls, and our other user education efforts. So we use things like that to really understand, and also, of course, the type of support queries that we would get. We look at whether users were struggling with the basics of getting set up and app building, or were we getting more queries around advanced concepts of how do I scale my applications, how do I build more applications faster, and how do I really make my applications look incredible. So that kind of gave us a good sense of where these developers were in their entire journey, whether they were all at the beginning of the funnel, or were they more towards the end and being solidly retained. And a mix of these gave us a good idea.
Now you realize why I'm asking all these metrics questions, because I have the metrics hat on, right? So FOSS metrics, super fan. So I have to. It's like the power of the hat compels me to ask about this stuff. I'm curious. A lot of companies in this space, especially when you're talking about trying to gauge usage, talk telemetry. Have you had that conversation? I'm probably sure you have. Like, oh, can we send stuff back? What can we collect? Maybe give us a little insight on that conversation and where you ended up.
Yeah, I think we've all had that conversation at some point in time or the other. If you're an open source product, I think it's a tough, complicated conversation because you're constantly trying to balance between having more data so that you can make better product decisions, but at the same time being a better product that users can trust and respect, because it values your privacy and security concerns, right? And what we did is we really just fell back to our roots and principles here, and we said that the reason we went open source, and the reason we built this community, and the reason that we're able to grow through word of mouth and whatnot, is because we've just been transparent through this entire process, right? We transparently build the product in open. We transparently prioritize issues. We transparently acknowledge our mistakes, as well as we celebrate our successes, and that's where it really fell on. So we just transparently tell people that Appsmith would like to collect your some behavioral data about the product from you. This data is actually going to help us not only make the product better, but it's also going to help us support you if you have any issues. If you don't want to do this, it's perfectly okay. You can just turn it off, and here's how you turn it off. And we deliberately made that easy. We didn't, there are these dark patterns where you can just say, hey, it's on. I'll never tell you about it, but you can go and find it somewhere in the settings of this product, right? And some people err on that side, but we wanted to kind of stick to our roots and be extremely transparent. So it's pretty much one of the first things that you see. You can directly just turn it on or off. You can save it, and we will kind of respect that option that you decide.
Got it.
But we also plan to do things to kind of encourage you to share more data. Things like kind of giving you. We're thinking about actually giving you different services that such as an automatic email service where you don't have to set up your email for your instance, and things like that. So we believe in encouraging people to share more, but at the end of the day, we really also have to be transparent about it.
Yeah, we've definitely seen transparency being very key to this kind of discussion. We'll be very curious to maybe check back in later to see how these kinds of incentivization strategies goes, if it actually gets people to share more data with you. I think that would be a really great finding to see that a lot of other projects would benefit from. One thing that I was curious to ask, and I think that a lot of open source companies talk about transparency a lot. I think it's a very a common value that's baked into a lot of what we do. But I think that one not necessarily a mistake that we see, but just a thing that people definitely overlook is that, just because you are going to be transparent with your community about something, that doesn't mean that it's trivial to figure out how to actually message, any given thing that you might want to say to them or ask to them. There's a lot of, complexity in the details around that if you're going to be effective when you talk to them about stuff. And so I think one of the things that, where that is particularly meaningful is, the positioning of the product. And I think where Appsmith sits is super interesting because there are also, other companies and products in the space that build kind of similar things that, are sometimes not open source. And, so like a Retool comes to mind, for instance, where you have this, a proprietary, of the proprietary version of what you're building. And I'm curious, with your community, in your marketing, these kinds of things, how do you position, how are you positioning Appsmith with regards to these other players in the space? Are you, have you ever said the open source version of X? Are you shying away from that kind of thing? How are you generally, talking to your community about, what Appsmith is doing in relation to others?
Yeah, that's a great question. One, while there are a lot of tools in this space, it's actually interesting to note that our biggest competitor today is probably actually just vanilla React, to be very honest, right? And you'd be surprised how low the penetration of something like low code or no code is, especially in the engineering community. So while something like Retool does come up every now and then, we don't like try to actively position ourselves as the open source Retool because to be honest, while Retool is a good product, we really think that there is a lot of scope there. There is a lot of scope to actually build something that is going to be extremely engineering and developer centric, and that's kind of why we don't really think too much about Retool or try to position ourselves as the open source Retool. In fact, I don't think you'll ever see that written on Appsmith. When people ask us how do you kind of position yourself over here, the main thing that I tell them is that we position ourselves as an open source low code framework. And now what that means, and for developers, right? And what that really means is that we really want to build this framework with the entire community. We don't want to build this alone. We want to build it in a way that is super extensible so that different members can actually come and contribute different parts of the product. A lot of projects that are open source are actually really hard to contribute to, right? And we want to change that. We want to make it really easy for you to actually modify the platform so that it can actually suit your custom needs. We also want the entire platform to be very developer centric. One of the issues today with no code, low code is that because it so drastically reduces the barrier to actually building applications, you tend to get distracted by all these different types of user personas that come into your applications, right? You have product managers, technical support heads, a whole plethora of these different personas who are trying to use your tool. And because of that, you try to create the lowest common denominator tool that can solve all of these different use cases and user types. But for Appsmith, we've always been very clear that it's going to be primarily focused on engineering folks. And because of that, we actually don't even shy away from writing code in Appsmith. In fact, we have one of the best coding editors of pretty much any low-code tool out there, simply because we actually believe that there are some things just better done via code. And that's the other part of the puzzle where people come to Appsmith because they see that it's genuinely a much better developer experience. Another example of this is you can actually sync all of your Appsmith applications to a Git repo, create commits on a separate branch, raise a pull request, have it reviewed by one of the engineers in your team, have it merged in, and have it automatically deployed, just like you would in a normal CI/CD process. And that's kind of unheard of for most low-code tools, right? You don't see that really often, or that being a strong use case if you're the customer support head who's trying to build a tool, or if you're a product manager in one part of the company who's trying to hack something together. And I think that's kind of what's drawn the community towards us, because we've just been so focused on open source, making it a framework that's really extensible, and just keeping it really developer centric, by really enabling you to write code in a much better, faster, easier manner, and even maintaining that code. And that's really why people see us as being really different.
So just to make sure I am on the same page about kind of where things are before my next question. So are you about to turn on your enterprise kind of the non-core, the part that you're charging for? Is that something that you have started doing or about to do, or where are you exactly?
So we've been doing this for about the last 3 to 4 months. We've been working with a few early customers, in a very touch kind of field basis, very close relationships where we're just trying to build it out together. But the platform's kind of almost ready now, and we're going to be launching it soon. You're going to be able to sign up on your own, use the business edition without having to ever speak to someone, because that's another thing we really believe is that, the entire platform should be really self-serve and very easy to get started with without having to go through a boring sales call.
Thank you for building for introverts who don't like to talk to people.
Yeah. That's very helpful. So I guess, now that you're a couple months into it, were any of the either assumptions or like hypotheses that you were testing, were any of them wrong that you've like learned from already?
Um, I'm not sure if any of them were wrong, but we actually discovered a lot of things that we didn't know before, which were pretty interesting. One of the things that we discovered was, that a lot of users actually want to just not build a standalone application, but want to extend their existing applications. And that was kind of like an eye opener for us, because we actually learned that a big part of the community was using Appsmith as part of their existing React projects. They were just embedding it, in an iframe, and kind of like they gave up on that React project, maintaining it and making it better, and they just said, hey, we'll do the rest of it with Appsmith. And that was a pretty interesting insight, and people actually wanted a much better experience of doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there like definitely lots of product usage insights that will come from the second you start, really putting it out there like that for people to get started. Yeah. Matt, did you have something next?
Yes, I do. We've only got a few minutes left. And so, I have to ask the most important question of the day, and that is, do you believe in time travel? Because I'm asking this for a very specific reason.
Okay.
And the specific reason is, I always like to ask if you could go back in time and visit the younger version of yourself and give them advice on, maybe something to avoid, something that they should focus on early on, something that you wish the younger version of you, maybe 5 years ago, would be able to do. Because eventually, if we do crack the time travel thing, we can always go back, listen to these, and then go back and tell younger you, this is what older you said. But for those who don't, maybe they can learn from, what you would tell yourself.
Okay. And this is considering that I wouldn't be destroying the timeline, right?
Yes. This is a parallel pocket universe or something. I don't know.
Timeline intact.
Yes. Thank you for going down that route, because that just,
Yeah. Okay. One thing I'd probably tell myself is to network a lot more. It's something that I picked up a lot later in life, and I only realized its value much later on. I think networking is super important, because it gives you a pool of people that you can actually draw immense amounts of information from, a pool of like-minded people that can actually push you. I know there's this like quote that you're like the average of the 5 people that you hang out with and whatnot. But I really feel that by networking more with people who have done incredible things, you end up learning so much more, and it kind of pushes the bar of your awareness in so many different aspects that you would have never thought about before, and it just helps you grow so much faster. And that's something that we really believe in. I personally really believe in that. It's not about where you are; it's how quickly can you grow to where you want to be. And I think that networking is a huge lever in that aspect. So yeah, definitely like network a lot more.
Yeah, that's good advice. But in the engineering space, there's a lot of people who don't like to talk to other people. They're like, social interaction is very bad. So any quick advice on maybe, what they could do to network?
I think one great tip here would be to just attend a lot of engineering conferences. It's a great place for networking with a lot of like-minded people. Typically, engineers don't like networking because it's like speaking in different languages to people who can't understand the language you're speaking, right? But at these conferences, the great thing is that you get to meet engineering folks at different levels, right? You get to meet product engineering folks who have done engineering before but are now in the product domain and thinking a lot more about product. You get to meet sales engineering folks, that are now like just focused on selling software and using their engineering skills to actually do great demos, or like automate things in the sales pipeline. You get to meet leadership folks that are thinking about what are the best practices for some of the engineering processes that you already follow internally, and what could you potentially do to actually improve those processes. So I think like conferences are like one of the best places because there's a lot of great ice breaking that happens over there, because you're typically in a setting where there's a great engineering topic. You're talking to people about something that you already have some understanding of. There's a great place to ask questions, and people are like very open to actually interacting with you and answering your questions. So that would be my tip for networking.
That's a great one. Is there, I guess, one just very small follow-up, is there a particular conference that is like a standout favorite of yours, whether past or future, that you're looking forward to?
I think in Bangalore, India, there used to be DroidCon that I would like, pretty much ardently attend like every single year. But lately, the FOSS conferences has also been like really good in that aspect, and I'm really looking forward to that one.
Nice. Very cool.
Awesome. Now, by the way, I don't know if anybody realized this, but I'm totally at risk of potentially being canceled by all the engineers on all of my socials because I classified all engineers as not being social. So that was not intentional. It was a joke. I'm sorry. Do the opposite. Like and subscribe to this channel, please.
Absolutely.
Nikhil, I want to thank you for hanging out with us today. We really enjoyed the time. Hopefully this was enjoyable for you as well. We do appreciate your insight into the open source space, what Appsmith is doing, and of course, answering all of those rapid fire questions up front.
Thanks so much, Matt. It was really great speaking with you, and thank you so much for having me on the show. It was really good speaking to you as well, Avi.
Likewise.
Until next time, we hope all of you will follow us and, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. Later, everyone.